difficult times that ignite internal conflict between our principles and our sense of survival. A time to acknowledge our fears and insecurities and not allow them to dominate our self or dehumanize us. A time when memories of the past should not be used to destroy the future. A time for solidarity that does not erase our differences. A time to turn away from despair, fanaticism, xenophobia, and those who justify inhumane acts in the name of God. A time to denounce views that disregard the other and lead to mutual destruction. A time to understand that the building of peace is a long road and cannot be delayed. This poem was written by Bernardo Sorge, who is a Brazilian social scientist. Since I was 17, I've delivered high holiday sermons every year without interruption. This marks my 30th Rosh Hashaná and Yom Kippur in a row. But this year feels different. Normally, I would start with a story or a joke, but not today. This Rosh Hashanah morning, I want to begin by emphasizing my vulnerability, by exposing my humanity. The gap between rabbis and their congregation can sometimes suggest a sense of distance, as if we were made of a different substance, as if we lived in different worlds. That's never true, but it feels especially untrue this year at the dawn of 5785. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel often spoke about human vulnerability. Once he said, human beings are a reminder of their own fragility. Scratch the skin of a person, and beneath you will find anxiety, fear, and trembling. That's exactly how I feel this morning. Anxious, afraid, and trembling. This sermon stems from a shared trauma, one that we are all living through now. I am a rabbi grappling with chaos, searching for hope. I have a strong connection with Israel. My bond with that country developed even before my connection to religious Judaism. My mother is a Hebrew teacher, and since childhood, Israel has been a part of my family's story. When I was 15, I took my first trip to Israel. For 2 weeks, I traveled across the country with the Tanakh, learning about biblical places firsthand. Since that trip, I have returned to Israel more than 30 times. My rabbinical training took place in Jerusalem, where I lived for 4 years. I speak fluent Hebrew, and I have friends and relatives living in Israel. As Jews, we are all spiritually attached to Israel, regardless of our physical presence there. The most painful moment of the past year was the terrorist attack on Simchat Torah 1 year ago. The slaughter of our brothers and sisters in Israel shook us all. It wasn't just an attack on individuals, but on Israel's right to exist and the threat to the Jewish people as a whole. A reminder that even in Israel, Jews are not entirely safe. Here in the US, we have witnessed the rise of anti-Semitism in public spaces and on university campuses. What was once a safe haven for Jewish life is now facing a dangerous blurring of the line between anti-Israel sentiment and outright Jew hatred. Since October 7th, we've been fighting two wars. One to ensure our physical safety, and the other to preserve our humanity in the face of evil, which I would like to call a moral war. While the former has been fought on battlefields, in the political arena, on college campuses, in the media, and in international courts of law, the latter, the war to preserve our humanity, has been waged within our minds, hearts, and souls. The tools I have at my disposal to confront this moral war come from our Jewish wisdom. In my personal search for inspiration, I draw from ancient teachings, and I invite you to join me now on this journey. Judaism teaches that the survival of our moral integrity depends on our ability to hold fast to our humanity, even when confronted with evil. Israel is fighting its most legitimate war since its founding. And yet, the loss of innocent lives must remain a source of deep discomfort and pain. Jewish wisdom reminds us that our ethics must never be suspended, especially in the most challenging moments. Our tradition explains that we triumph only when we maintain our own humanity and the humanity of others. Biblical laws governing war emphasize the importance of maintaining a sense of morality and ethics. These Torah laws are designed to preserve human dignity, protect the vulnerable, and limit violence. Before engaging in battle, the Israelites were commanded to offer peace to their enemies. The Torah makes provisions to protect innocent civilians and non combatants during war. Women, children, and livestock were not to be harmed. The Torah forbids the destruction of trees and other resources during war, emphasizing that the goal of war should not be senseless destruction. The Torah also specifies that Israel is not to wage war against certain nations, teaching a respect for boundaries and agreements, even in times of conflict. According to the Torah vision, when war is inevitable, it must be conducted with strict ethical guidelines. During moments of great tension and danger, the Torah insists in justice, mercy, and a profound respect for life. By seeking peace in the first place, protecting the innocent, and limiting destruction, these laws aim to ensure that warfare does not erode the moral fabric of society. A famous midrash tells us that when the Egyptians were drowning in the Red Sea after the Israelites had successfully crossed, the angels in heaven decided to celebrate. But God rebuked them, saying, "My children are drowning, and you want to rejoice?" This allegory suggests that celebrating the death of the Egyptian enslavers would be morally wrong and therefore unacceptable. Nevertheless, according to the biblical narrative, the Israelites did celebrate their freedom after their liberation from Egypt. They sang and danced, and their song was immortalized in the Torah as Shirat Ayam, the song of the sea. Why were the angels forbidden to celebrate in heaven, while the people of Israel on earth were allowed to rejoice in the downfall of their enemies? I would argue that while the angels sought to celebrate the enemy's suffering, the Israelites focused their celebration on their own survival and victory. In other words, the people were permitted to celebrate because they were rejoicing in their own deliverance, not in the death and destruction of others. Ancient Jewish beliefs go even further in their request for moral standards. There is a passage in the Torah in which Moses while still in the midst of the desert, tells the people of Israel the way they should behave after conquering Canaan. I find it very inspiring for the moment we Jews are facing. From that passage, I understand that the Torah is telling us to start caring about the future while still in the journey. Judaism teaches that we must decide the kind of society we want to live in after conflict, while wars are still being waged. If we determine today the kind of life we wish to have after war is over, we fight differently. If we remember that there will be a day after, we approach conflict with a different mindset. Let's keep in mind that we will continue to live with others, both in Israel and elsewhere. We must also remember that we will continue to look in the mirror, and we want to be able to see a moral human being reflected back. I'm very proud of the movement by which I was ordained. While the reform movement was initially created as an anti Zionist movement, and some ultra Orthodox groups still oppose the modern state of Israel, the conservative movement has been committed to Zionism from its very beginning. At the same time, the conservative movement had always believed in the importance of a Jewish state that is deeply rooted in the values of democracy and ethics. The Hewlett East Rockaway Jewish Center, a flagship congregation of the conservative, has been enriching Jewish life for over 75 years. Urgic was created just a few months after Israel declared its independence. This synagogue was never intended to stand in opposition to the state of Israel, but rather to strengthen the bonds between local Jews and the Jewish state. Since October 7th, Urgic has created many initiatives to make our connection to Israel even stronger. The Israel Committee was reestablished to make sure that Israel is present in every program of this congregation. We've decided to recite the Israeli anthem after each of our religious services. We added a weekly prayer for the hostages held in Gaza. And we've hired a young Israeli educator to master the teaching of Hebrew and Israeli society to our children and youth, among several other initiatives. At the same time, as the conservative movement it represents, this congregation is also anchored in the belief that its commitment extends beyond Israel. Herjik feels a responsibility to work toward a better world. Every Shabbat, we pray for Israel alongside a prayer for our country, for the United States. We recently updated our Ose Shalom to include all of humanity in our plea for peace. Today we say, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Israel ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Peace for all the people of Israel and for all who dwell on earth. We see our commitment to the broader society as an extension of our responsibility to Israel and to the Jewish people. Pirkei Avot asks, if I am only for myself, who am I? אם אני לעצמי, מה אני? Jewish tradition sustains that our humanity depends on our capacity to feel for others. War can numb us to the suffering around us. And when we stop relating to others' pain, we lose our humanity. That, I believe, is war's greatest casualty. Friends of Herjik, in a recent talk, Rabbi David Wolpe imagined a conversation with his distant ancestor about the challenges we face today. He says to his great, 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 great grandfather, we are having a tough time at Harvard. But his ancestor, astonished, interrupts him. There are Jews in Harvard? Rabbi Wolpe continues, yes, but there is a lot of hatred of Israel. His ancestor, equally astonished, asks, there is an Israel? We've come so far, and we should be proud of our accomplishments. But we must also remain steadfast in our determination. We will accept nothing less than a democratic, secure Israel and the right for Jews to be treated with dignity worldwide. To achieve this, we must resist the temptation of dehumanization, othering, preserving our humanity in the face of evil. Bernardo Sorge, the Brazilian social scientist, concludes the poem which I started my sermon with as follows. Because Rosh Hashaná renews our hope in the return of hostages, the end of war and terror, and the negotiations of a path to coexistence in peace and security with the Palestinian people, we give thanks. May this message of hope be deeply rooted in the ancient Jewish ethical values that sustain us through times of both physical and moral conflict. Let us recognize that preserving our humanity in the face of evil is not merely a moral obligation, but our most potent instrument in the pursuit of a sustainable peace. Shana Tova.